Welcome back to Knowing the Truth with Pastor Kevin Boling. Information regarding the resources referenced on today's program can be found at www.knowingthetruth.org. Now, here to continue with today's program is Pastor Kevin Boling.
Hey, welcome back into the second half of the Knowing the Truth radio broadcast. Enjoyed our conversation there with Sophia Lee from World Magazine about what goes into your mouth and about eating to the glory of God. How should we eat? When does what we eat become an idol? And so forth. You can check out her article again out there at worldmag.com. That's www.worldmagazine.com or worldmag.com, I think it is. And you can go out there and check it out. Hey, by the way, World Mag would make a great Christmas gift. They really have done a great job on putting together a great magazine. It's very colorful. It's very well written. The content of the articles is very interesting. They really just continue to improve the quality of that magazine each and every issue that comes out. It comes out bi-monthly. And so I should say bi-weekly, I guess twice a month. Let me put it that way. Whichever one those is. It comes out twice a month. And so they do a great job. And there's a lot online now that goes along with it. They do conferences and so forth. So anyways, you can check it out there. Speaking about doing a great job on a number of different topics, the folks out there at the Discovery Institute in Seattle do a great job as well. And specifically on the subject of intelligent design. And intelligent design really plays in that space in between creationism on the one hand and Darwinian or naturalist theology or philosophy on the other hand. And so it's saying that the evidence is pointing to or consistent with that there is a designer, and that we shouldn't dismiss that evidence simply because the evidence is pointing there to a designer. So they've done an excellent job. And we've had a number of folks on for over the years from Discovery Institute, including Dr. Stephen Meyer's been on speaking with us a number of times and so forth. Well, just yesterday they released a brand new documentary about C.S. Lewis. And why this is being released now is a lot of people don't know that this Friday is actually the 50th anniversary of the death of C.S. Lewis. Now, his death, of course, was overshadowed because that same day was the day that JFK was assassinated in Dallas. And so obviously that was taking the headlines across the country, and a lot of people didn't even realize that that happened to be the same day that C.S. Lewis died as well. Well, this new Discovery Institute documentary talks about C.S. Lewis and the subject of intelligent design. And one of the people that was involved in that documentary is John West. John, welcome to the Knowing the Truth radio broadcast.
Kevin, thank you for having me.
John, tell us a little bit about this, maybe a little bit about C.S. Lewis. Did I state everything correctly there? And then a little bit about this particular documentary as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, C.S. Lewis is probably one of the most beloved Christian writers of the past century. It's been reported that his books like The Chronicles of Narnia, Screwtape Letters, Mere Christianity have sold more than 200 million copies. He was featured, part of his life story in a basically changed version was featured several years ago in a Hollywood film called Shadowlands. And so, yes, he did die this Friday, and on Friday at Westminster Abbey in London, he's going to be memorialized in what's called Poets' Corner, which where they've, alongside such greats as William Shakespeare, Jane Austen, and Chaucer and Dickens and many others, he's going to get his own little memorial plaque. So, you know, he is important, and I think especially actually even more powerful and more read in America than in England, and I think beloved for the reason that he really stood up for truth and Orthodox Christianity in a very winsome, both rational and imaginative way. So how we got involved in this project is, you know, not so many people, or not enough people, I think, know of his real personal story from atheism to Christianity, and part of that was his struggle of what he called the argument from undesign, which is when you look around in the world, you know, the world as it exists now, there is a lot of design, but things break down. There's a lot of suffering. There's cruelty. There's pain. Of course, some people who know his story know that his mother died of cancer when he was very young, and that was traumatic. But also, he served on the front lines of World War I. And that was very traumatic and nightmarish. And out of that, in fact, at that time when he was atheist, he wrote a number of poems, including one called Satan Speaks, where he actually gives a very grim view of nature and says if you look around things, if anything, it would be demonic. It's so awful. And the story of how he changed from that view to really think that there is evidence of genuine design and purpose, and of course went on beyond that to embrace Jesus and to embrace Christ, is a fascinating story. So we tell the part from, how did he get from the argument from undesigned as an atheist post-World War I and to this idea that nature does display evidence of design. And so that's sort of what the story. It's only 17 minutes long. It's easy to watch, and I'd encourage. And it's inspired by this book that I edited last year called The Magician's Twin, that explored Lewis's views on science.
We're actually showing the video right now out on sermonaudio.com. The radio broadcast is being live webcast is produced at the exact same time simultaneously out on sermonaudio.com/knowing the truth. And while we're speaking, the video from that documentary is playing out there in one of the windows as well. And as I watch it, there is quite a bit in the beginning where he looks at the reality of life and a lot of the things that we see in this world that many people would find very disturbing. I see there was a lion on there that had was enjoying its kill. There were skulls that were there from some dead animals. There was war scenes and so forth. And so it must be that point in the video where Lewis was looking at all of this around him and coming to such dark and dreary conclusions about the world. Is that correct?
That's right. And during that time, if people watch it, they'll actually hear part of a poem that Lewis wrote as an atheist right after, and actually during and after World War I, he wrote this poem, and it really gives an insight into his thinking at the time and his struggles.
It's almost a little bit like an Ecclesiastes or something, where he's taking a look around the world, and when you look at the world under the sun without taking God into any aspect of it whatsoever, it's a very dark and disturbing place to be, and that seems to be what Lewis is writing about there.
It was, but what's also really intriguing is the way God opened his mind even before he became a Christian. Part of his journey to that was seeing the other side. So, for example, even when he saw all the evil in the world, he still saw incredible beauty. And to try to deal with that, well, if things just were the product of blind matter and motion, where does beauty come from as something real? Because I know in my heart, and I see it and appreciate that there's something real there that's just astounding beauty. Where does that come from? And so that was one of the glimmers that began to point him, even while he was an atheist, to, well, there must be something more. Then morality. I think, he was a great writer later in life on how everyone has access to a certain basic moral law. Even though we're sinful, we have some basic moral ideas written on our hearts. And his point was that he realized as an atheist that if he really thought that the world was just blind matter and motion, on what grounds did he have to say that things were evil? Why should he be upset? If that's just the way it is, how can he cry against the universe and say this is unjust or evil, or that I'm upset that about the death and the pain and the suffering? Because that's just the way it is. And so, if you really believe that morality is something real, it doesn't fit with the materialist worldview. You actually have to have a more transcendent understanding of morality that goes beyond just blind matter and motion in order to criticize. Even to come up with what he says is the argument for undesigned, to actually be troubled by the evil, you actually have to believe that there is some real moral law that actually is transcendent.
Right.
And that also again began to point him, even as an atheist, to this materialism doesn't quite make it. Maybe there does need to be a transcendent cause and intelligent designer. And then our reason itself if it's just blind matter in motion, why should we have any confidence in Darwinism or anything else, which is the product of our reason? And so, again, he thought that this materialist view ended up being almost self-contradictory, and that pointed him to, well, then there must be some basis. And then the final argument, which really pointed him towards intelligent design, which was something he got, oddly enough, from Platonic and medieval philosophy, is a very basic truth, which is an effect cannot be greater than its initial cause. And so if we have things like that are incredibly complex, like human beings, or we have human reason or morality, then the ultimate cause of that can't be something less than it. I mean, so if we actually think we really do have minds, the ultimate cause of it can't just be mindless, or else you're actually saying that there really is no cause and effect. If you're actually saying that things come out of nothing. Now, I know Christians believe that God created everything out of nothing, but actually, accurately, even that isn't creation out of nothing, because the belief is that God Himself existed.
Exactly.
So it actually, there was something.
Yes.
I mean, the material world was created out of nothing, but there actually was something. If you actually literally believed that there was nothing, then nothing's going to come from nothing.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
And so when Lewis appreciated that, he thought, well, that means that if it was just seeing all the other good things around and the incredible beauty and complexity required an intelligent designer.
You know, when you were talking about the materialist or the Darwinist, and in this case, as we're zeroing down a little bit further, but where they look at things that are taking place in the world and they're bothered by it, one question that we should ask them is, why does that bother you? You know, as you were just articulating, we should start with that question. You're saying that you're troubled by what you see taking place and that you can't believe in God because we live in this type of a world. Why does it even bother you that is taking place? According to your scheme of things, this is just the survival of the fittest. This is the way it should go. So I find them borrowing a lot of capital, taking the language that is more in a Christian worldview, or at least in an intelligent design worldview, and then hijacking that language and bringing it into their discussions when they don't really have a framework for that. Is that correct?
You were exactly right, and that was one of the key things that when Lewis saw that, he realized that his materialism really didn't add up. I mean, you're right. It's only if you believe in God or something like God that pain and evil and suffering becomes a problem. Then it entitles you to ask, well, why are things messed up? If it's just blind matter in motion, well, that's the way it is. So who are you to scream against the universe? That's just the way it is.
Right.
But if you have a belief in a beneficent creator, then you begin to understand this isn't the way that he would have wanted it, and so then it becomes a question that becomes troubling you. But if you just believe in blind matter in motion, why should you be upset? You're exactly right.
John, there seems to be a problem, though, that sometimes the neo-Darwinists, they actually claim Lewis as one of their own. Are they just reaching back into his atheistic days and claiming those statements but not following all the way through?
Well, I also think they're trafficking in confusion. The word evolution means everything from just change over time, small little changes, to everything comes from one common ancestor, and then the really uniquely Darwinian form of evolution, which is its own unguided process of just selection, survival of the fittest based on these random variations. So when you talk about Lewis and evolution, we need to be a little more specific. And I would say on the issue of common ancestry, whether everything came from one common ancestor, Lewis, as a Christian, didn't see reason to object to that, although as he grew older, he grew more skeptical of those claims, and we know that from his letters and from things that he wrote. But on the issue of whether it was an unguided process of natural selection acting on random variations, even before he was a Christian, actually when he was recovering from his wounds during World War I in a hospital, he read a book called Creative Evolution by a French Nobel laureate that really basically made him think that the Darwinian case for evolution as an unguided process was based on natural selection was just poppycock. And in fact, in 1925, the same year as the Scopes trial in the United States, he wrote, while he was still an atheist, he wrote a letter to his father where he said that he was thankful for, he came to basically the idea that Darwinism, that Darwin and Spencer, the two big proponents of evolution from the late 19th century, really were built on sand, on gigantic assumptions. And he was saying that even while he was still an atheist. So he came to, distrust especially the claims about what natural selection and unguided, mutations could do, even before he was a Christian.
In his film, well, let me first remind our listening audience who we're speaking with here today. We're speaking with Dr. John West. He's the vice president of the Discovery Institute, where he is the associate director of the Institute's Center for Science and Culture and director of the C.S. Lewis Fellows Program on Science and Society. He's written a number of books, 12 books I think he's edited, including The Magician's Twin, which we've alluded to during the broadcast today. And we're talking about C.S. Lewis, and we're talking about him specifically for two reasons. On Friday of this week is actually the anniversary of C.S. Lewis' death, the 50th anniversary. And also, we're talking about C.S. Lewis because of a brand new documentary that's just been released by the Discovery Institute. There's actually a web page that you can go to. You can certainly go to discovery.org, but there's also another page that you can go to. It's cslewisweb.com. That's www.cslewisweb.com, and you can see all the information about The Magician's Twin, the book that came out that Dr. West edited, and also you can see the brand new documentary out there as well by the same name, The Magician's Twin, C.S. Lewis and the Case Against Scientism. Dr. West, I wanted to ask you, how did C.S. Lewis prophetically warn about the potential misuse of science? What did he have to say about that? We see that taking place so much in our day and age. Did he see something like this coming?
He did. In his books, The Abolition of Man, and then a novel, That Hideous Strength, that if people haven't read, I strongly encourage it. He really, in his time, both in places like the Soviet Union and in Nazi Germany and in his own home of England, there were lots of social Darwinists who were saying things like, we need to breed a better human race using eugenics. Scientists are the only ones who know anything, therefore they basically need to be put in political power, and so that really means some scientists, not all scientists, need to be given political power. He thought this was really destructive of a free society, and so he warned about that, and the penchant to try to remake the human race using genetic engineering, the coercive uses of science. And I do think that is, you just need to look at the headlines, whether it's the use of 24-hour-a-day surveillance or drones, which, I'm for certain appropriate forms of government surveillance, but frankly, I think some of the things that are proposed are rather scary. To simple things that would seem silly, but, if you think about them more deeply, they get kind of concerning. New York City trying to ban sugary drinks of certain sorts. Now, I don't let my kids drink every drink under the sun, but that sort of micromanagement in the name of science. Science tells us that it's bad. We don't want people to be obese. Therefore, the government now is going to dictate what we can actually buy and imbibe. Or some in the global warming debate have actually said, there's one scientist in England who said we need to basically put democracy on hold for a while.
Wow.
So that we could, and people have praised actually communist China, because communist China has, I think, banned certain forms of plastic bags. And wouldn't it be? We should be doing what China is doing. They're much better than our democracies on global warming. Which this is sort of scary. Whatever your view on climate change, this sort of rhetoric is very authoritarian and scary. It's the sort of thing Lewis predicted.
And when you think about China, there, of course, the one-child policy as well. And so many of those radical environmentalists, they think that people are the problem, not the solution to this problem, but they are the problem in and of themselves. And therefore, if we could just do away with people, then we would have this pristine environment, and it's all about the earth and all of these types of things. I think the bottom line in this, Dr. West, is that really understanding, having a worldview that looks at these things, in particular from our view, from a Christian worldview, it really does have ramifications on every area of life. It's not just a a discussion for the academics or for the theologians, but what we believe is going to show up in our headlines every day as well, right? Is that what you guys try to do at the Discovery Institute?
That's right. And as it says, in Proverbs, as a man thinketh, so is he. And I think that is very true. And I think a lot of times we're so focused on the symptoms that we don't focus on about some of the root causes in these really fundamental worldview things. As you start thinking about, that is what ends up in the wider culture. And so you're exactly right. It's not just the ivory tower. It's what happens to your kids when they if they go off, what our modern culture is selling them on certain lifestyle things that in fact are very destructive. On social policy, you're right. I'm involved in a project now called The War on Humans, which is for next year. And when you read what some of these people are saying, who you would want to think are just fringe figures, but in fact are at major research universities with taxpayer support, they do think humans are the problem. And they would be, in some cases, would like to reduce the human population by 90%.
That is just scary when we think about those things taking place, and that many of these people are now in positions of power in our government and in our society. That gets very scary. I did the interview there with, his name's escaping me, but a rat is a pig, as a dog is a boy.
Oh, yes, Wesley Smith.
Wesley Smith, right. And that statement is that there's no different value between a pig or a dog and a boy, that each of them are on the same plane, and there's no inherent greater value in a human being than there is in an animal. Now, when you get people thinking this way, no wonder why that they can inflict such pain and horrible atrocities on fellow human beings. It starts in the mind. It starts where you're thinking about human beings as being less than human, and then suddenly, once you conclude that they are less than human, you'd be surprised what the human race can do to each other. We saw that, of course, in the classic examples in Nazi Germany, but don't conclude that that was an isolated incident. That type of mentality is still alive and well in our society today. Dr. West, we thank you for the great work that you guys are doing out there at the Discovery Institute. We really appreciate the books that come out of there, and the projects like this one today with the C.S. Lewis documentary and so forth. Anything else we should be looking for on the horizon that will be coming out soon from the Institute?
Well, you mentioned Wesley Smith, and he has an e-book that will be coming out that deals with some of these matters, and we'll be having a documentary early next year titled The War on Humans, where we will really expose what is, in fact, happening on some of those issues. And I think people do need to know about it, because their kids are going to be getting it in the schools, and it does start with how you think about things.
Well, very good, and thank you again so much. I'll point people to the website here in just a couple minutes, but thank you so much for your time today on this subject. We really appreciate it.
Well, I always appreciate being on. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you so much. That was Dr. John West, and Dr. West is the Vice President of the Discovery Institute, where he's also the Associate Director of the Institute's Center for Science and Culture and the Director of the C.S. Lewis Fellows Program on Science and Society. He has written or edited 12 books, including The Magician's Twin, C.S. Lewis on Science and Scientism and Society. That was the subtitle of that book, and so you can check that out. He's written a number of other books as well. He's been interviewed on Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Fox News, and now we can add to the list the Knowing the Truth radio broadcast, which I'm sure is on the top of his list there on all those different periodicals that we talked about. They're located out there in Seattle, Washington. Love to someday when I get back out there again. My son-in-law's family lives out there on Bainbridge Island outside of Seattle. Someday when I get back out there to visit them, I'd love to get over to there and do some interviews in person with some of the folks there at the Discovery Institute. But you can go out to their website in order to find out more about the books that we were talking about today and about all of the things that they offer. Their website is www.discovery.org. www.discovery.org. That's www.discovery.org, and you can find out more information. By the way, there's also information out there about, we're running and showing right now on Sermon Audio, about the magicianstwin.com. That's one page that you can go to look for that information about the documentary we were just referring to, and also www.cslewisweb.com. That's all one word, www, all one word, cslewisweb.com. You can find out more information out there. I mentioned when we first introduced Dr. West on the program today that I've done interviews with some of the other folks there from the Discovery Institute, specifically Dr. Stephen Meyer. The most recent discussion I think that I've had with him was about a book that he wrote called Darwin's Doubt. And it was talking about the Cambridge explosion, that there was a sudden burst in the layers of fossil records that are found in certain layers. And this was something that was a problem to Darwin. He didn't have a good answer for it, and it was a gnawing problem. And Dr. Myers came on the program and talked about that issue. Also, Dr. Myers has been on the program to talk about his book. It's called Signature in the Cell. Well, Darwin's Doubt was his book as well, but Signature in the Cell was kind of his seminal work that he did. The idea of that book was, you know, when we look out in space and we see all of the glorious creation in outer space, like we see with, or even the near heavens as well, like Psalm 19 says to us, you know, when we behold the glory of God in the firmament and so forth, you know, this great expanse that we see out there, we can see very clearly the fingerprint of God on all of those things. Well, now, in our day and age, in the time that we live in, we can now not only look through the telescope to see those things, but we can look through the microscope to see those things as well. And when we look down to the very minutia of life, you know, in the cell, we find that the signature of God is there in the cell as well. We see all this tremendous amount of complexity that we find at that level as well, and we say, hey, this could only have been put together not by random chance, not by, you know, just mutations that take place on their own, but this could only have taken place by the hand of a designer. And for us as Christians, we say that designer is none other than Almighty God himself, the God of the Bible. He has done this. He has done these wonderful things, and greatly to be praised is his name. Well, thanks for joining us again. Remember this, Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. We'll see you next time, right here on Knowing the Truth.
You've been listening to Knowing the Truth with Pastor Kevin Boling. Knowing the Truth is the outreach ministry of the Mountain Bridge Bible Fellowship, located on Highway 25 in Travelers Rest. For more information about the church and radio ministry, visit us on the web at knowingthetruth.org.
The opinions expressed on today's program are those of the announcers, their guests, and callers, and do not necessarily represent those of the staff and management of his radio network, the Radio Training Network, or Clear Channel Communications.